Without Andrew, we could never have any of these meetings. He's like the MVP of Zoom.
True.
I'll take it.
Long overdue recognition. All right, Mayor, I see you're here. I don't know where Councilmember Brady is, but if that's okay with everybody else, we're going to get going because it's a super long afternoon, I think, for everybody today. So without further ado, I'd like to call to order the June 14th, 2021 meeting of the City of Charleston Traffic and Transportation Committee. Thank everybody for being here and ask Councilmember Del Chapo to lead us in an invocation or a moment of silence, please.
We'll bow our heads and take a moment of silence. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, next is approval of minutes from May 24th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any additions, deletions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Next on our agenda, number 3 is the King Street Road. Oops, hang on a sec. Next is the King Street Road Safety Study line to UG Street. For information, I see Mr. Johnson, who is with us, and Mr. Benjamin. I guess you want to give us a lead in, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir, and appreciate Josh being here. Just got him an invitation, and so glad he's going to be able to give you all a briefing on this. Just 2 seconds of background. In the aftermath of the unfortunate pedestrian death along this corridor of King Street, the city had communicated with SCDOT about the possibility of doing what's called a road safety study, not a road safety audit. Road safety audit is regulated by the feds.
All right, I said audit.
But we asked for a road safety study similar to what was done on Maybank Highway back in 2019 to bring all different constituencies together at different levels of government to determine both short and long-term opportunities in the corridor, specifically between King at Line and King at Hugie. If you remember, there was a road safety audit from King Street and Line all the way towards the Battery that I presented to you. Will be bringing forth its recommendations getting implemented in late 2022. And so I'll let Josh give the background as to who was brought together and some of the recommendations out of it, and a next step that's coming up that we hope you all as electeds can give us support in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. As Keith mentioned, the road safety audit that was an SCDOT and federal funded project that took place and is now being developed into an actual construction project ended at Line Street. And this section from Line to UG, specifically around the Carolina Street intersection, was brought to our attention for kind of a similar review. It doesn't come with the same, federal funding that an official road safety audit does, but we do kind of structure it around kind of a similar process. So we did a field walkthrough. A lot of folks invited, some that are on this call were able to make it, of course, as well. City of Charleston representatives, BCD COG, and Charleston Moves, and SCDOT. And so we did that in end of March of this year, and we spent some time pulling together all of the data and short and long-term recommendations for that segment. And the end of May is when we were able to finalize the report. As the cover sheet shows both the SCDOT and City of Charleston logo, we consider it to be kind of jointly authored with inputs from others like the COG and Charleston Moves. And so out of that, what we've done is there were some low cost and short-term kind of improvements listed, like crosswalks and ADA ramps across the stop controlled streets, and fixing some broken sidewalk areas, adding more speed limit signs for the 25-mile-an-hour zone through there. But what we really found in the discussion and the field review was there were a lot of ideas about what maybe the area should look like, and all of them may not all go together. So for example, if bike lanes is an important thing for the area, within the existing cross section, there's probably also not enough room to retain parking. If there's an idea of maybe a traffic signal being relocated to from the existing Sumter Street to the Carolina Street intersection, you know, what that means in terms of traffic diversion and everything. So we didn't want to, in our very kind of high level and walk through to do this study, make a specific recommendation related to those without collecting more data on what that would do and eventually getting public input on what the vision of the area should be. So one of the main long-term recommendations that came out of the report was to have that type, you know, pick up where our study left off and carry it forward with that type of analysis with more data collection and pulling together some concepts to show to the public to get feedback. And so what we did at SCDOT this spring was list that as one of our CTC project requests, is that they would pick that up again where we left off and carry that forward to try to identify, you know, what the vision is and what construction projects beyond the low cost stuff should come out of it and move forward. So we did submit that at the end of May when it was due to Charleston County. And if it's funded, great, the CTC. Otherwise, you know, they do the TST requests annually as well. It'll be in around 6 months. So we'll plan to submit it then if it's not picked up by the CTC.
And just to round that out in terms of dates, so you know the immediacy of this. So CTC's committee meetings are occurring mid-July to talk through the requests that have been submitted. So this request has already been submitted, and then obviously deliberation and then determination. So any and all support from those who care about safety in that area is definitely welcomed. We think this would be a good step in the right direction. I know some of you know this, but just so it's on the record, when we did this with Maybank Highway, the city made a request for CTC funds for the pedestrian crossing at Riverland Terrace Theater. We then coordinated with Charleston County, who on our behalf made an application to the Council of Governments for Complete Streets funds and leveraged what was $200 and something thousand project into a $1.2 million project that will have sidewalking on Woodland Shores to a multi-use path to that inevitable pedestrian crossing. So we want to kind of follow that same line of success where we all come together and say, here are the long and short-term opportunities, and then begin to identify the funding mechanisms to get them done.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Johnson or Mr. Benjamin? Councilmember Jackson.
Thanks. Mr. Benjamin answered most of the things I was going to be asking Josh. If this type of study that you just completed in March and then reported on in May was similar to the whole Maybank public safety study. So I'm glad to know that it is leading up to that kind of cooperative venture, knowing that, you know, the Maybank was county and state and city primarily would be the stakeholders that would carry out a more comprehensive plan. Is it just the state and the city on this King Street? How can we leverage even more resources?
Yeah, our request for funding, of course, was to the county. They were invited to participate, but weren't able to. And obviously being downtown, a little bit different than the Maybank area, which had kind of the jurisdictions vary out there. So they were obviously sent a copy of the whole report with the CTC request. And I think I also sent it to them whenever we did finalize the report, and I sent it out to everybody as well.
Well, it's great you have, you know, a way to make this stuff and hope that it's picked up by CTC, but then you can also wait and put it through your own funding stream. So thanks very much for giving us the update.
Any other questions for either Mr. Johnson or Mr. Benjamin on this particular presentation?
Thank you, Josh.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot, Josh. If you're wandering around downtown and you happen to be at the corner of Gadsden and Halsey, how about go take a look over there and see what it looks like? It could use some help, please. Thanks. All right. Next on the agenda, without reading the whole thing, is the amendment of Chapter 19 of the Code of City of Charleston, our fee schedule for road blocking and other permitting ventures. Ms. McKee, are you going to handle this for us?
Yeah, if you'd like me to, we had discussed, you thought it might be useful for me to run through a kind of those brief slide deck that I presented a few weeks ago, and I'm happy to do that.
I think that would be helpful if you don't mind.
Sure, no
just so we've got it
problem.
recorded.
Yes.
And it'll remind me what to tell everyone tomorrow night.
Fair enough. Let's see.
I see Ms. Shear has appeared too. So anytime
Yes,
you need
she
to
has.
weigh in, whenever,
So,
whenever you need to weigh in, please do it.
And I want to definitely publicly thank Mallory for getting us here to the finish line and putting this in ordinance form for y'all today. And obviously thanking Keith and his whole team. There's a lot of folks from his team that really worked hard on this, as well as BFRC staff that were involved as part of the team to help us get here. So it was definitely a team effort. So thanks to that whole group on helping us get here. And also Janie, who is not with us, can't be here, but she was our legal team person initially. So Mallory really was great by stepping in for us. So really quickly, I know you guys have seen these before, so just trying to kind of get this fresh in your minds. But we've got a new proposal for permit fees for TNT for you today. So how do we get here? I think a lot of you know that permits might involve both public service and TNT. What happens in the street is controlled by TNT. What happens on the sidewalk is controlled by public service. So we were meeting pre-COVID to try to come up with ways to make the application process more efficient for customers so that they don't have to make multiple stops. And in those meetings, we really identified the key points that we wanted to tackle in our work. So the number one thing was, how do we reduce the number of applications or departments visited, needed to gain approval to do work in the right of way, right? So how do we have one umbrella for all these right of way permits? This, what I'm bringing forth to you today, is just the first bite of this elephant. So we're not quite there yet, but this is our ultimate goal, and this is step one in getting us there. Because what I'm here today with really kind of gets to this number two piece. So how do we increase safety and minimize disruption to both residents and businesses? So how do we increase collaboration? How do we optimize the length of time for right-of-way permits? And how do we proactively inspect all those permits as well? So making sure that we've got eyes on the streets on those permits. So briefly, what do we do to kind of get to this point today? So we started with process mapping, looked at all the permit types that are issued by TNT, talked about the intake, who's involved in reviewing those, and what it takes to get those permits out the door. And then we walked through what are the complexities. So what elements appear that make a permit more complicated or more timely to get through, and who has to get involved and when does it get elevated? So we kind of talked through all those things to identify what things make them harder to just get out the door. And then we developed some time tracking. So those folks in TNT that are involved in the permitting process started tracking their time associated with every permit that was issued. So then with all those elements, we came to with this developed fee schedule. So, and I'll get to that in just a second. So as we work through kind of those four elements, we really felt like we had to make a paradigm shift. Existing permits are issued by the type of work being conducted, and what we found in those identifying complexities, what really caused more time was more about where the work was being conducted, not necessarily what was happening there. So that was a paradigm shift that we made pretty early on. A little bit about their existing fee structure. So their existing permits, like I said, we looked at all these street blocking permits. Currently there's no fee associated with those, but they do submit a traffic control plan. There's a dumpster permit, which is $10 a day, meter bag permits, which are currently $10 a day, and then construction parking, which is currently no fee, and moving permits, which there's currently no fee for. So a lot of things that have no fees associated with them, right? And if we look at what happened in 2019, they processed over 2,200 permits and brought in about $380,000. So this is kind of the new structure that we are proposing to you today. There's basically three primary categories. we broke them up into a full street closure, a partial street closure or obstruction, and then a parking space closure or obstruction. So anything involving the travel lanes, those are then further delineated by, is it a major or a minor road? And those delineations currently already exist in the city's GIS system. So that's not something new that is having to be created for this fee structure. And then parking spaces, whether it's a metered space or a non-metered space. So once we had the structure in place, we then had to go through and identify, okay, what are the fees that are going to be associated with each of these types of reviews. So first is the review fee. So who needs to be involved? And then, you know, how much time is it taking them to do these reviews? BFRC, like I said, was part of the team. They derived our hourly position rates for those folks that were involved. And then we did the time tracking. So then we were able then to make adjustments based on real world application of what was happening. Meter space fees, we adjusted those just to capture the loss of revenue. So currently, if a metered space is taken all day, we would generate, I think it's $18. And right now we're only collecting $10 per day in those spaces. And then the new element to the structure that we are proposing are inspection fees. So how do we get to that? So we took the 2019 permits and we did a GIS drive time analysis. So based on that, we were able to determine that permits issued in 2019 were on average 2.16 miles away from 180 Lockwood with an average drive time of 6.62 minutes. So we took those minutes, multiplied it by the inspector position rate, added the mileage reimbursement, and that's how we got to our proposed inspection fees. So all of that work resulted in this fee structure before you now. So again, over on the left, you can see kind of the primary categories. And then again, travel lanes are delineated by major or minor streets, parking space obstructions by metered space or non-metered spaces. And then in the third column there is a one-time review fee. So that what would apply simply when they made their application. Then what's kind of new, if you will, is this daily inspection fee. So you can see they're pretty much all the same. We propose that those would be inspected once a day. You'll see that the major street for a full closure, TNT felt it was important that those would be inspected twice a day, hence the $35 daily inspection fee. For any of these, when a metered space is impacted, they would also incur the $18 per metered space per day as well. And then we were curious about, okay, well, if we had put this, if this fee structure had been in place in 2019, what might the revenue have been in 2019? This is definitely a lot like comparing apples to oranges. So I just want to say that out of the gate. But you can see there we had, they generated about $380,000 in 2019. And based on the information that we had to work with, it looks like we could have generated close to $5 million in revenue for those permits. So one big caveat is that permits and TNT are generally issued for 180 days. So again, we want to get to the minimized disruption, right? So we're hoping that these inspection fees really encourage applicants to apply for permits for only the days that they absolutely need them. So making sure that our streets are as impacted as for the smallest amount of time possible instead of a blanket 180 days. And I think that will also have an impact. We won't have as many daily inspections to perform if this encourages them to get permits for only what they need. And obviously we tried to do this estimate conservatively, but so 5 million is very exciting, but again, it is a little apples to oranges, but we thought it was worth the exercise and wanted to share that information. So what are the next steps? So again, like I said, this is just the first piece of a bigger elephant, right? We really want to get all these right-of-way permits under one umbrella, make it as simple as possible for applicants. Our target for that is January of 2022. We're already working with the public service team to bring them bring them along this bus ride, if you will, with us. But if council decides to approve these fee changes, the next step will be to make the configuration changes in EnerGov. The upgrade has already happened in EnerGov, so we're good there. And we've already engaged with IT staff so that they're aware that this is potentially coming. And so we're already ahead of the game on that. And then once they're implemented, we'll be working towards implementing some performance management elements, primarily identifying performance targets, as well as developing real-time and transparent reporting. So with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions, and maybe Mallory might have some additional comments based off of her work and the wonderful work she did putting this into ordinance format for y'all today.
Ms. Shear, have anything you'd like to add on top of what Tracy has told the committee?
Well, there's just a couple of things I do want to point out in terms of the ordinance that is included in y'all's agenda. This is essentially to help y'all accomplish all the hard work that Tracy and Keith have put into this. The agenda essentially is accomplishing, the ordinance is essentially accomplishing four things. We're amending Article 19. That's essentially to clean up the language regarding the dumpster permits. That's one of the fees that we are amending. The current ordinance, it mentions $10 or it can be amended time to time. We're just striking that $10 to avoid any confusion in the future, and we'll be going off of the fee schedule that was proposed. The second thing that this ordinance is doing is it's making a new Article 20 to keep all the right-of-way obstruction fees kind of in a nice organized section for us. In this, it'll define the types of fees that we're using, provide all the definitions for the right-of-way obstructions in the metered parking spaces. And then you'll see at the very end, it's adopting the fee schedule that Tracy just went over. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any structural questions on what's been presented to us before we open up for discussion on the ordinance?
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman. I'm moving for approval.
We have a motion for approval.
Second.
And we have a second from Councilmember Brady. Any questions from the committee? Looking around, Mayor, Councilmember. Just a couple things really quickly. Just so the committee is aware and council, we're going to adopt a fee schedule as part of this ordinance, but that can be amended from time to time going forward, as I'm correct, right? Would we, if we amended the fee schedule, have to come back to this committee or council to do it, or is that something that we can do without coming back for a full consideration of council?
I believe it would need full consideration, but it would not need a public hearing because we are adding new fees to this one. A public hearing is required.
Okay, so one of the things that came up, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Jackson.
I just have a question that popped in my head. So I haven't studied the Public Works Committee agenda. Are they looking at the same ordinance today? So will it be coming from both of us, or how is Public Services feeling about all this?
So it is not going to Public Works. So we're working with the Public Service Department now on their fees and trying to align it with kind of what we've done here today. So what we anticipate is when we get to that point with the Public Service, we'll take that to the Public Works Committee. Then once we get to the point where we put it all under one umbrella, we'll bring it to both committees. That was the vision anyway. So happy to take your guidance.
This is just for the streets, which this committee and Mr. Benjamin has jurisdiction over, and we'll see how Tom O'Brien and his team does, but we'll have to come back and look at it. So one of the questions that came up and at City Council and has been asked since then is the interplay between this ordinance and the state law section 6-1-330, which essentially defines the limitations on us being able to collect service or user fees. And I went back and looked at that ordinance. Thank you for sending it on to me. And unfortunately for us and for guidance, neither service fee or user fee is a defined term in the state statute. So I know there may be some questions going forward about whether or not we're limited by this ordinance, by the statute, to doing the calculations that Tracy and Mallory and Keith have so diligently done by putting some actual time and expense on it. Just something to be thoughtful of. What I've explained to those council members have asked questions about this. My preference would be for this committee to pass this on to City Council and give it first reading. let public service do their work. And during the course of all of this, if there's some hint that we're not bound by that state statute, we can discuss it. But in the meantime, we'll at least be able to start collecting these fees and have something in place that to me seems like a no-brainer. So with that, is there any other questions for any of our team that has so diligently put this together? And thank you. I mean, I know this was hard work. Was Tracy, you weren't at the last city council meeting, but it was popular for information. I think it'll be even more popular as an ordinance. So if there's no further question, comment, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. Any opposed? The ayes have it. I would ask you, Mallory, tomorrow night, if you're available to sit in, just in case there's any questions about this from a legal standpoint at city council, that would be really great because it may come up. Okay. Great. All right. Thank you all very much. What did I do with my agenda? I have it right here somewhere. All right. Next on the agenda is the pedicab ordinance and contract renewals. I believe Ms. Halverson has chimed in and tuned in here. So just as a way of prelude, the pedicab ordinance or the pedicab licenses and franchise agreements are all coming up for renewal. Sterling, help me here soon.
August
Remember?
15th.
Okay, August 15th. So I actually asked Ms. Halverson to go take a look at where we are with the contracts, what rights and liabilities both the city has and the pedicab companies. There are 3 of them that contract with the city, what rights and liabilities they have. There is an automatic renewal provision in there if it's asked for by the pedicab companies and they have to pay an additional fee. So I thought it would be at least good for us to have this on our radar. I will tell you that pedicabs in front of this committee over the course of time, from the time we first licensed them to now, have been a little bit contentious. So I thought it'd be good to get out ahead of it. So at least we understand where we are and see if we need to clean up the ordinance in advance of putting this back out, either for bid or for renewing the contracts, which I think each company has by right the option to do. Am I right about that, Sterling?
That's correct. They have the option. I wouldn't say that it's definitely automatic. The city still has a lot of discretion about whether to renew. So if we had good cause for, a reason not to renew, that would be something to consider. But that's just for discussion as far as what everybody thinks about the renewals. One thing to point out is that we don't have a limitation on the number of renewals that a company can have, either in the ordinance or the contract. So right now it's sort of an indefinite renewal, and the renewals are for 5-year periods. So that could, turn out to be a long term if we continue to renew them, 3 or 4 terms, you're looking at 15 or 20 years there. So that's just something to consider if you wanted to have a limitation on that. But that's, just something that I wanted to bring up for discussion. The other thing I wanted to point out is that we currently have 15 daytime and 15 nighttime decals for these companies. And the way that those are broken down are 2 companies have 4 daytime permits and 6 nighttime permits each. The third company has 7 daytime and 3 nighttime decals. And so we talked about the possibility of adding on some extra nighttime decals to the ordinance, which would require an ordinance change if we wanted to go in that direction. And then we would have to bid those out separately just through our regular bidding process that's outlined in the current ordinance. And so we would have to, like, if we were going to say add 6 new nighttime decals, we would then have to bid those out. And each company would have the opportunity to bid on those, but I don't think there would be a guarantee that 2 would go to each. It would just depend on how their bids came back. But that is something we could consider if you all, wanted to consider adding some nighttime decals to have more of these pedicabs on the road in the nighttime hours. And I've forgotten what the actual nighttime hours are off the top of my head. But I believe that there is a cutoff time for when they operate. So
it's 3 a.m. They cut off at 3 a.m. by contract.
3 a.m. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. I reviewed the contracts. I mean, we might want to tighten up some of the indemnification and insurance language in the current contracts if we renew them. But, other than that, they pretty much match and mirror what's in the ordinance, the current ordinance.
Any questions? Mayor Tekelberg.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly would recommend that we to add accountability, have some limitations on the renewals, that they aren't perpetual and go on and on forever.
I agree with that. And actually both the ordinance and then if you go back to look at the contracts aren't as clear as they should be. And I think if you all don't mind, we'll work with Sterling and try to clean up those before the contracts come back up for renewal and make it clear it's one more 5-year period and then that's it, right? I mean, that seems to me to be the fair thing to do. The other thing is the number of medallions that are out there. It seems to me, just having spent a good bit of time, both day and nighttime on the street, particularly now nighttime, and with the way we've reconfigured King Street, pedicabs I'd say have the most access of anybody to the street, that adding a couple medallions per company to a total of 6 at nighttime would not be the worst thing we ever did. It would give some access. I don't know how they'll fight it out. I will just tell you, my recollection is that the last time around, they actually all agreed. I'm sure there's some antitrust violation that goes on, but they all agreed to split them up 2-2-2. And they all seem to be getting along pretty well right now. So that may be where it goes. I don't know if there'll be another company that want to come in and bid on them too, but I would at least ask this committee to direct Sterling to at least look at adding a total of 6 medallions that would translate to 2 per company for nighttime use as we go forward.
So do you want any votes today, Mr. Chairman, or just next month?
Just sort of direction. If anybody is violently opposed to anything we've been talking about, please let us know, because I don't want Sterling to go do a whole bunch of work if it's not going to go anywhere. Seems to me to be giving a little advisory opinion here would be a good thing. If there's any thoughts that any members of this committee have, now's the time to do it.
I mean, I personally, and you know, being educated by all of y'all about our strategies, especially for King Street public safety, it seems like the increase of nighttime use would be very logical. It goes right along with our climate action plan. I mean, I don't see any downside as long as we have the companies that we think are working responsibly.
Right, and we should definitely check in with Chief Reynolds on that. I saw Mayor Tecklenburg had his hand up.
I did. I must say I have not heard any reports of the drivers being anything but safe. I was curious to ask what their safety records are like, and I would just maybe have us consider that if some driver or some company got out of hand and they were having numerous violations, that their license, be liable to be pulled if that's not in there already.
That's in their contracts, Mr. Mayor, and very clearly spelled out, and it's also in the ordinance.
Great, thank you.
And over the course of 10 or 12 years, we've had a few complaints here and there, but I don't think they've had any real safety issues. The biggest issues, they've been the victims of some accidents, not the cause of some of them. And with the new street configuration, they're really efficient up there. And I will say this, the reports I've gotten back from the King Street patrols is that they've worked really well with the pedicabs to sort of figure out the flow of pedicabs and traffic up there. And it's worked really well in moving people up and down the street, particularly in the later hours. So all things to look at. When, Sterling, do you think that these will be back in front of us? I guess we need to do this in July, right?
We can do it in July. However, if we add the 6 new licenses, those won't get final approval until the August, I think the meeting's on the 15th or 16th, which is going to be after the expiration of the current contracts. But if we're going to go ahead and renew those, what we could do is just amend after the fact, because it's going to take some time to bid them out again. So I'm envisioning that we would renew the 3 existing contracts, if that's the will of council, before that August 15th deadline when they expire. And then when we have the 6 new licenses that are approved in August, after the ordinance change, we'll bid those out. It might take a few weeks, but then we can always amend those contracts to add in the extra 2 decals or however many it ends up being per company. So I think we can work it out that way. It won't be simultaneous, but it'll be close.
Okay. Sort of on that outline, unless there's any objection, it looks like Ms. Alverson has some work to do between now and the next meeting, and we'll get something on our agenda. I guess, are we even going to need to have it on our agenda if they opt in under their contracts? Really, the only thing that this committee will have to take up is the adding of the decals, right? Because unless there's for cause not to renew, they do have the option contractually with us to renew. Am I right about
That's
that?
correct. I think they just have to
Okay.
pay the franchise fee for the term. So I think you're right. We probably don't need to bring it back for approval.
Okay, so let's look to August to see if we have some stomach for adding 6 medallions or 6 decals or whatever we call them, which I think would be great. And we can go from there. And that, at that point, we'll know sort of who's renewed and who hasn't anyway, and we'll know who we're dealing with.
Okay.
Any more questions on the pedicab renewals, licensing, and increased medallion or decals? Great. Okay, next on our agenda is our director's update. He's got an update or two for us, I think. How about lead with your chin here and give us the big news?
I'll be on wait on that, but I guess you wanted me to let everybody know what I've told you all privately about my time in Charleston coming to an end in the month of July. Let the mayor know, let staff know as well. I'll say what I said to staff. When I came to the city, everything was happening all at the same time. It was new city, new job, and a new baby. Son was born on May 1st, and then I drove down on May 22nd and started on June 5th. And so no honeymoon, but I'm very grateful that you all trusted me. You know, as the Gullah say, there's come years and been years. I'm definitely a come year. And to get the trust of you all to engage in this work, and especially of our staff, has been amazing. You know, really been a privilege to be able to be a part. So just very, very grateful. Not going tomorrow, got a few more weeks left. And a lot of work as you'll hear in a second. But definitely wanted to make sure you all say publicly what I've already told you all privately. A bunch of updates for you all. Please let me know if I'm missing something. First thing is with the bike share and micromobility RFP. As you know, our bike share contract and all the extensions we've given ends November 23rd of this year. And so with the mayor's permission, we brought together a committee that included city staff, planning staff, MUSC staff, as well as Charleston Moves, with some consultants that we brought on that are experts in the space to help us write a new RFP. Reason why we did that, the industry has changed significantly since we did this the last time. We even went as far as to do a digital charrette with NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, where the cities of Philadelphia, Portland, and Memphis sat with all of our documents and went up and down about what we should be thinking about contractually and otherwise before putting out this RFP. So we have that draft, and that'll be out to the public on next week, as I was told by the procurement office today. But just a quick blurb on that. We as a committee came up with 5 specific objectives that we wanted out of the RFP process that I'll share with you all. That'll give you an indication of where we want to go from a mobility standpoint. We wanted to make sure that Charleston was positioned as a national leader in equitable bike share usage and operations. Wanted to expand micromobility past just the peninsula. We have so much work happening all over the city, making sure that's happening. Utilizing bike share and other mobility options. So looking into the addition of Class 1 e-bikes into the fleet process, which I think will, if you see the tracks of how our existing bike share program is used, folks could go into other municipalities, crossing over waterways and otherwise. So how do we enhance that? Sustaining public-private partnerships to make sure that this vendor is involved in community in a significant way. And then being able to attract additional partners too. Thankfully, our title sponsor has agreed to continue to stay on with us. And so that's an attractive piece for the vendors that would engage in us. So just wanted to give you all that update. Just some signal projects to update you all on as well. We are planning to fix the infrastructure at Broad and Meany. That does not mean the actual housing of the signals, but the actual in the ground traffic cabinets, functionality of the signalized intersection itself. And so we plan to have crews and some of our contractors working on that at the mid to end of July. It'll be a 30-day process. Some of it will have to include usage of some portable signals, but more information on that soon for how we'll be handling traffic in that area. Lockwood and Calhoun flashing yellow arrow got an approval from SCDOT, and we'll plan to start on that work right after the 4th of July holiday. Folly and Formosa, I had a different report, but just got an update from Josh literally as we were on this meeting. They got the bids back for that project, and they were significantly high. So they plan to rebid that out and do some letting in August. So more on that once they get those bids and they do their own negotiation. As a reminder, the city is a partner in that through our signal maintenance agreement, but it's a SCDOT project. The Project 700 pedestrian enhancements should be completed this week. That's for 4 different locations, 3 of them on Cumming Street and 1 at Rutledge and Cleveland. So those should be activated this week. And then just some pieces about hurricane preparedness. One of the things that was a discussion for us as a department was what were ways that we can enhance specifically the signal system in preparation for major emergencies, but also for hurricane season. As you know, one of the main tasks of our department is as quickly as possible making sure all 200 plus signalized intersections are up and going post those storms. And so there was 2 enhancements that we've brought to bear, one of which will be in bids and purchases for you all today or tomorrow during Ways and Means. We have partnered with a company to obtain portable signals. This is going to be extremely helpful to us and take a burden off of CPD if and when we lose signalized intersections and need to still have them function for vehicular traffic to be able to make their way through. And so we hope for your continued support on that. And then, as you may or may not know, at many of our main corridor intersections, we've been installing battery backup systems. So in the case where there might be a power outage, those signalized intersections would still be able to function. So when you think about Folly and Camp, when you think about 7 and 17, Maybank and River, Glen McConnell and Magwood, those intersections over the next couple of months, some of which are already installed, will have battery backup systems. So if and when there's emergency situation, they would still be able to function and be able to make sure that folk are able to get from point A to point B. I know I'm saying a lot of things, so after I finish, please let me know if there's questions or concerns. 2 more things for you. One, I don't know if you all saw on the news, but SCDOT has released their 2021-2022 pavement improvement program. Some of those streets are in our city, and so I'll read off those 5 or 6 really quick. Woodland Road, Trike Street over in Mayville, Asheville, Columbus Street downtown, Riverland Drive, Gulfview Drive, and South Grimble Road. All of those are on SCDOT paving lists. Letting will occur later on this year, going into next year. But in partnership fashion, District 6 gives us a heads up about some of those streets so we can collaborate. So for example, on Columbus Street, that's a major street for our low line and the ability to have mid-block crossings. And so already have communicated with SCDOT about including those design criteria, not just into their paving, but actually potentially for them to construct that on our, obviously city will still have to fund, but construct on our behalf, similar to how Brigade Street happened, where SCDOT did that full construction and paving for us. Finally, come on over here, brother. I want to introduce you all to our new traffic operations manager, James Wallace. We're excited to have him. He's an alum from Clemson. He has his PE, but also was with Bill Engineering, which is one of our own calls. And so he's very familiar with most of our staff already and has had to hit the ground running on a number of different fronts, both on management and TRC. So I just wanted him to say hello if y'all didn't mind.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me here. As Keith said, James Wallace, PE, worked for Beal Engineering as a traffic engineer. Before that, I also have experience in the electric utility and construction fields. So taking Michael Math's position, I know it's big shoes to fill. I knew him personally. He's a great guy. So I look forward to working with all of you and moving things forward. I have the same number as him too, so I can't hide. So if you need me, just dial him up.
We'll just change the name in our our phones. Well,
Yep, just
welcome.
switch it over. Thank you.
Congratulations. We're glad to have you in the city. Lots cooking. So hope you all enjoy. Hope you enjoy your time here. It's going to be an adventure, I'm sure.
I am so far in the ground running.
Great. All right.
Any questions or concerns or clarity points? I know I said a bunch of stuff, so let me know.
You did. Councilmember Jackson.
Thanks. Congratulations to Mr. Wallace. Welcome. And we've already had our little original goodbye dialogue, Keith. So I just want to continue that for the next month. We're proud of you. We wish you weren't leaving quite so soon, but you've started a lot of amazingly good stuff. And I know that DOT headquarters is never going to be the same because of the way that you approached your work on behalf of the city to make the state a collaborative enterprise. So I think that should have your name and lights on that accomplishment. You can talk to me offline. I picked up 2 important roads on James Island that are usually pretty neglected. So Riverland Drive and South Grimble. So can you just plan to call me about that, or have somebody call me to better understand the details so we can let people know? I'm wondering, you also mentioned Folly and Camp as an example of your battery backup system for signals. So
Yes,
how
ma'am.
deciding the intersections that will meet that threshold or whatever it is that will determine where you put them?
So there's some places that we've had where they were already existing. Then with the improvements that SCDOT did, specifically in West Ashley to the signalized intersections, they included battery backup systems. But there is a number of places where we wanted to introduce. So a lot of those other locations are along the crosstown. Maybank at Folly is one of the ones where we want to introduce, which literally every storm we have to go out and address. So I think that people will be glad about that having battery backup. And then Glen McConnell at Magwood, which is another intersection that religiously, unfortunately during storms, goes out. So having those there. So Folly and Camp has had it for some years now. When it was rebuilt, that was one of the infrastructure enhancements that was placed there. And so it has a little bit of a cost to it. So being able to partner with SCDOT is always great. So we welcome being able to continue with that. But with most signal rebuilds, that gets a part of it. So for example, Folly and Formosa, Yeamans, that would already be, that's in the package for that enhancement at that location.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Benjamin? Yes, sir, Mayor Tecklenburg.
Not a question, but James, welcome aboard. Look forward to working with you. Keith, there'll be more to come, but thank you for your service. I think when we look back, we will see your tenure as a quantum leap for our city's mobility efforts. There's just no question in my mind about it. You've done a remarkable job, particularly when it comes to issues of safety, of equity and transportation. And you taught me about the concept of multimodality. Now, I thought that was something to do with music, you know. Back at Berkeley, we learned about the Aeolian scale and the Dorian scale and all those Greek musical scales. So multimodality isn't necessarily different musicians playing in different keys. So I got it. It's all about accommodating different ways of people to be able to get around in a safe and equitable fashion. And honestly, I thank you for helping to elevate our game here in Charleston. We got a ways to go still, but we wish you every success for you and your family. And God bless you for your service. And thank you to Robbie Somerville, who yet again has agreed to serve as our interim director of the department. Thank you, Robbie, for always being there. You're terrific too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think all of us on this committee and at council and in the city echo those comments of the mayor. Keith, good luck with everything. You always know how to find your way back here. And on your way back, if you see anything that needs improving or pothole that needs fixing, please make sure you take care of that way because it's gotten a lot better around here. So when are you actually leaving? Are you going to be here for our next committee meeting, or is this your final meeting with us?
I think there's still some things I'm gonna wrap up with that. I gotta go through the HR process and navigate that as need be. So I'll definitely make sure you all know ahead of time. I'm supposed to be with Kay next Friday. She's traveling this week, so I'm supposed to be with her next Friday.
Well, good luck with everything.
Thank you,
For
sir.
sure. All right, members of the committee, unless there's anything else for the greater good of the city or for the traffic and transportation, we will stand adjourned and see each other, if not before, tomorrow afternoon. Oh, Mr. Mayor, is it 4 o'clock for Ways and Means tomorrow?
It is. We had a pretty long agenda, so I thought we'd start just a few minutes early to make sure we try to stay on time when we get to city council.
Well, the members of this committee are now on notice, 4 o'clock tomorrow.
4
We'll be
o'clock.
on time.
All right.
All right, y'all.